What I realize that many times we fall in love with solution rather than problem.
I always joke that when you have a early stage company, you don't have a company. There is no company. There's no brand. It's you who are the brand.
Our niche is product engineering. We are very much focused on helping global companies build their engineering team in India.
Even Figma took like 5 years when they start expanding, and then there are companies which go viral on 3 months.
In this journey, what have you observed the most challenging part of a product launch?
For me, the biggest challenge is like how do you get product and engineering teams to work well with marketing and sales teams? Having this agile mindset about being really passionate about something, and then suddenly like you realize it's not working, then you need to like detach yourself and then find out what's working and then go passionate about that. I think that's the most critical skill.
Making your product AI ready is very easy. But making your product leverage AI to solve a problem with that impact is not that easy.
It's one of those things where I believe it's not just a hype, it's actually going to change the way which world operates.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hieroscope. Today we have with us Karthik, a founder and chief technical and product officer at Ignition. Karthik is not only a digital product expert, but he has also walked the wild road of being a startup founder. And I believe few times now, right, in his journey. So we are all about, to go deep into his journey from idea to execution, how he is using AI to push boundaries, how he has built his distributed team across the globe, including India. And along the way, we'll hear some fun stories from Karthik. Right? So Karthik, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Right. Karthik, a lot of our audience is startup founders, product engineering leaders, and many talents follow our podcast, right? Who aspire to kind of join startup and product bandwagon. So I think let's start with your journey first. Let's understand Karthik a bit more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, first of all, again, thanks once again for having me on the show. Pretty excited to connect with everyone here. So my journey, originally, born and brought up in India, in Bangalore, and then I grew up in India. Then I did my undergrad in India, and then I came to the US for my master's degree in computer science at Carnegie Mellon. That was like almost 18 years ago, and then after my master's, my first job was in Wall Street in high frequency and algo trading space, and then I did it for about 7 years. But then I realized, in finance, it is all about taking money and making more money and not having a tangible impact on the world. So I wanted to go into tech. But after that, I went to a business school, and then after business school, I went into tech. My first gig after my MBA was in a startup called Craft, which was a supply chain intelligence platform. I was the first employee there. And that's where I kind of learned a lot about startups. And now it's like a Series B or C company. So it grew to about 100 people. And so while I was there, I could see the whole journey of getting from 0 to 1 and getting product market fit, and then also like pivoting and figuring out different audiences where we can where we actually found the product market fit. And then once I was done with the startup, I was like, okay, I wanted to see what it is like to work for large companies. So I joined Facebook, which is now Meta, as a PM, and then I was a PM on the Facebook app, and then on the Facebook Reality Labs. So got to see a few different divisions within Facebook, and got to learn like how to build products at scale. So on the other end of the spectrum. And then after that, so I was like, okay, let me do my own thing. So I've done startups, I've done big tech. Now I'm like, okay, this is perfect time for me to like go start my own venture. And then that's when we launched Ignition. So while I was at Facebook, when we were launching a feature for Oculus, the spreadsheet to launch Oculus, the launch plan to launch Oculus, this feature was a spreadsheet with 100 tabs, and nobody knew where anything was, where the latest messaging was, or all the collateral was. So we're like, okay, let's build something to solve this problem, and that's how Ignition was born. And So, Ignition is initially we started Ignition as a platform where we can help with your go-to-market planning and messaging and positioning, but eventually expanded it to target all the product space, including PMs and product ops. So where you can do your customer research and road mapping, go-to-market planning. And then when we started Ignition, and then after a couple of years, we raised a nice seed round with Altman, Bling, and Audacious, and other big venture capital investors in the valley. Now the next iteration, rather not the final, would be we're expanding into the AI agent space. We're building AI agents for product and marketing teams. So yeah, that's been my journey so far.
Oh, super, super. Very, very interesting, right? So products are built to solve a specific problem in the market, right? And I think that entire product development and management space is sometimes feels like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You keep on iterating, you keep on, trying to find your perfect target audience, your niche, your messaging. You build a solution, go to market, and then when rubber hit the road,
Yeah.
I think you get to the reality, go to your iterations, pivoting, and again try to find a solution that hit the market. As a kind of product manager, and now building a platform to solve digital product management challenges. Uh, in this journey, what have you observed the most challenging part of a product launch, Karthik? What's your favorite feature? Which feature of Ignition is kind of most useful?
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
customers.
That's a great question. So I think for me, the biggest challenge is like, how do you get product and engineering teams to work well with marketing and sales teams? So I always felt there's a gap, which we call the go-to-market gap, where the product and engineering and design, and they're on their own island, and they have sprints, weekly or bi-weekly sprints or monthly sprints, and they keep shipping on an agile basis. And then we have marketers and sales, and marketers, they typically operate on a water flow basis, where you have a launch date and you're working towards a specific date. And obviously sales is more on talking to the clients. So the biggest challenge is like, how do you close the gap? Because a lot of the times, I think even what Brian Chesky from Airbnb was recently saying, that if you're a PM, it's not just enough if you know how to build a product. You need to know how to talk about the product to your customers so that they understand why they should use your product versus the competitor or any other product in the market. So that's also a core skill for a PM, and that is developed only when you can interact well with the marketing teams. So the features which I like the most is like, how do you give visibility on what PMs are building to the marketing teams, and then also make sure that you involve marketing teams early on in your product development lifecycle. And then eventually when marketing teams start building out their blog posts or emails or campaigns, they can use the customer research data and PRDs and everything which the PMs use to build the product as inputs to their campaigns, versus just reinventing the wheel again and they doing the whole research from square one, right? So I think that's the most interesting thing about Ignition, and in general, like when I think about how efficient product teams should operate.
Very interesting. And we are going through that cycle right now, right? That we are building our product. We have our product function, marketing function. User centricity is very critical when you are launching the product, and many of our stakeholders speak with customers, right? I think we always believe to stay closer to customer, whether it is marketing or whether it is product or engineering, and then those insights, how to collect. Sometimes amazing insights may come from marketing, which can help us build the product, and features of product which needs a voice through marketing. I think that cohesive alignment as a team, I buy that. Everyone aligned and moving towards solving the problem.
Exactly. And then there's the other thing is on the sales side. So you always have this sales product conflict where sales teams are like, oh, the product is not building what I want to get the deals to be closed. And product is like, we don't want to be a feature factory where we're just shipping features. We have a vision and we have a certain objective to meet. So we're building towards that. So again, there's a clash, a conflict there. So then how do you bring those two worlds together? So product teams can actually, product teams most probably they don't have access to Salesforce. So they don't understand the revenue impact. If they know clearly that, okay, by solving these top X features, they can actually have a revenue impact, then probably they will prioritize it. But how do you get that communication to flow on both sides? So yeah, both on product with marketing and product and sales. So how do you close the gap to build an efficient company?
Yeah. And typically these are not the challenges, right? When it is a very early stage startup where everyone knows everything, but when things scale,
Yeah.
I think this becomes more important. Karthik, when you started Ignition, has this been your original vision or it has shaped over last or evolved over last 4 years?
Yeah, it has evolved quite a bit over the last few years, and I always joke that for entrepreneurs that your when you make it big, it's usually never the idea you started with. You go through so many iterations because you learn from the market when you put out your product, your MVP in the market, and when users actually start using it, then you gain so much insights that you then the product then gets it goes into so many different directions. But at the end of the day, what matters is the market pull, right? Where is the demand and how big is the market? So a lot of the times we would start solving a very niche problem, but then that's great. But then that you can't scale with that. Then you got to figure out like how do we expand, and then in order to actually grow and make it a real business and a real venture back company, and that evolves. So our vision has we started out as building go-to-market plans for product marketing, and then moving into an entire product management platform for both the end-to-end product development lifecycle. And now we are expanding to build AI agents for product marketing, sales, and basically across the enterprise. So that's kind of how we have evolved in the last 3.5 years. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. We'll touch base on AI agent when we jump to AI section of our talk. Very, very interesting. I think similar for us. We started with a very, very specific niche idea to help global companies hire teams in India. Started a little broader. Then we realized, hey, our niche is product engineering. So now we are very much focused on helping global companies hire or build their engineering team in India, which is a complex problem to solve. And then we have started, venturing into AI, and now we are also leveraging a lot of AI, kind of building AI co-pilot, we call it, for recruiters. And now we also started expanding into, supporting Indian product companies to hire. Yeah, great. It's been 4 years, right? You have grown the company. You have found your kind of through multiple iteration your product market fit. If we go back to your early days, memory lane 4 years back, what are those most important decisions you made, or what are those early mistakes which kind of you feel grateful about that you made that on early days, based on which you were able to make multiple enhancements?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot of learnings from both my previous startup and my current startup. So one is like, I think a lot of the times I've seen like, as a founder, the whole reason you're starting a company and, you're quitting a very lucrative job. So I was at Facebook, and then quitting that and then doing this is like, you have very passionate about solving a specific idea. But the mistakes we sometimes what founder make is they're so married to the idea that when they find out that this idea doesn't work or it's not something which people actually want, they still keep on pushing and pushing and pushing instead of like quickly making changes. So I think it's almost like you need to be good at both. You need to be super passionate about certain idea and then have a vision and build towards it. But as soon as you find out that's not working, you need to be able to quickly pivot and also experiment with different ones. And then once you find something which is working, then again become passionate about that spot. So having this agile mindset about being really passionate about something, and then suddenly like you realize it's not working, then you need to like detach yourself and then find out what's working and then go passionate about that. I think that's the most critical skill.
Oh, true. And that passion comes with emotion, right?
Yeah.
And what I realized that many times we fall in love with solution rather than problem.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I learned through my journey of last 2.5, 3 years. That we were so much in love with how we want to solve a problem rather than love with the problem and finding multiple ways to solve.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an emotional journey, right? Hey, it's all about passion, drive, and how to pour everything into one direction. If it works well, if it doesn't, taking it back and going to other direction. That's the balancing game. Yeah, interesting. In again, for many of the founders, that founding that product market fit is a big game, right? When you felt your that aha moment, right? Hey, we made it. Now we have that so-called PMF in place.
Yeah. So I think the clear moment when the PMS is in place is when there's a market pull. What I mean by market pull is like your potential customers or customers are actually pinging you and following up saying, "Hey, you promised me this. When can I get access?" It's like, okay, I have budget already. By the way, when can I get onboarded? Instead of you chasing the people, saying, "Hey, are you ready for a call? Are you ready for next steps? What's the next steps? Can you get on a follow-up call?" Versus the customer start like pinging you back saying, "Hey, this is amazing," and they're referring people, they are writing good reviews, and they are pinging you and they are chasing you. And that's the moment okay, there's this market pull here. If the market is pulling you, you are not pushing the boulder up the hill anymore. When you don't have a PMF, you feel like it's like you're slowly pushing a huge boulder up the hill, and it feels very painful. But when you have a product, when you know that you're getting product market fit, it's like coming downhill. Like it's so easy, it's so frictionless, and then people are pinging you. And yeah, so that's the moment you know that, okay, something is working here, and you have to double down on that.
And how long it took you to reach to that level? For example, for us, I think we are still pushing it uphill, right? We are finding our PMF, having those success stories, but I think still not very much satisfied with we are iterating to find that very clear value proposition into the entire equation. When you had that moment, Karthik?
Yeah, so I think there's this person Lenny who I'm sure all the PMs know that he produced a newsletter article on exactly that, is how long do companies take to hit product market fit. And I saw that on average it was around 3.5 years, which is what we have seen. It's around, I think, 2.5 to 3 is how much it takes. Obviously, there are exceptions on both sides. If it's a normal distribution curve, it's like 3 years, and people, even Figma took like 5 years when they started expanding. And then there are companies which go viral on 3 months. Especially a lot of the AI companies today are taking off, like the AI SDR companies. They are within 3 to 6 months, they are taking off. But on average, so there are both exceptions on both sides. But on average, it takes about 2.5 to 3 years to hit product.
Yep. Great. I think you are, all across AI landscape, leveraging AI extensively in digital product management. What's your outlook on the landscape right now, and where do you see how it is evolving from here?
Yeah, so obviously everyone is talking about AI right now, and it's one of those things where I believe it's not just a hype. It's actually going to change the way which world operates. This reminds me of the time when iOS was a thing or iPhone was a thing, when everyone started building mobile applications, and you have Uber, DoorDash, Airbnb, like huge companies being born out of this revolution. And we are seeing that now, where we have this AI, specifically AI has been around there for decades, but specifically the generative AI around the LLMs, which has transformative capabilities around which humans collaborate and work in this world today. And I see this can be even a 10x the impact as to the mobile or iOS event. So the thing which makes this so impactful is the pace at which this whole thing is iterating. Like, you had ChatGPT, you had a GPT-3 and then 3.5, 3.5 Turbo, but you can see the quality of the output from 3.5 to 4. It's like it's making leaps. And when I remember when 3.5 came in, people were like, "This is great, but this is hallucinating. There's a lot of issues here. I would never use it for my work. Maybe I'll use it to do my kids' homework or something." It was that attitude. And then you have GPT-4, and then obviously more recently the Anthropic Opus and Gemini 1.5 Pro from Google. Then you're like, I thought this was going to take 3 years or 5 years, and in 3 months you already have a model which is way more accurate, and at some point it's going to get better than a lot of the work which humans can do on some of the very monotonous and repetitive work, which also I think is it's a double-edged sword, and I'll get to that. But I think that leaps in impact in which the LLMs can automate workflows is where this is leading to this whole revolution, as I can say, and multiple billion-dollar companies are going to be born in this era. But I think the big difference is going to be you probably won't need hundreds and hundreds of people to scale companies. You need like a very small set of people who have AI agents or AI workforce who are very AI enabled by AI to actually go build really big companies. So I'm pretty excited to see what's going to come in the next couple of years.
Yeah, interesting. And even when I was at SaaStar, 8 out of 10 founders talk about AI. I talk about AI. You talk about AI, right? And there were a lot of discussions and talks around, hey, it is also creating that competition bubble, right? There are many companies who are creating, rappers
Yes.
around all the models available. Where do you see? Because that's what we are seeing in the market, right? There are many small companies, medium, big companies are trying to solve a problem in a very different way. Because now with, as you rightly said, AI is not new, but it has been the LLM models, right? It has been democratized lately in last 1.5, 2 years, and everyone is seeing some or other use case, different ways to solve the same problem.
Yeah.
How do you see that market would evolve when there are so many companies? Again, it would be, many companies would mushroom. Ultimately, there would be consolidation. There would be few winners. But how do you see that landscape in next 6, 12, 18 months?
Yeah.
No.
No, so there's definitely a little bit of a bubble for sure when every Tom, Dick, and Harry kind of is building a AI startup, and a lot of them are rappers. But at the same time, I feel the market is huge this time. It's a land grab. It's a gold rush because I think almost every traditional SaaS company is going to get disrupted. If you think about the SaaS companies pre-LLMs, a lot of them were project management tools, whether it's healthcare, whether it's whatever industry. It's like it's a software to house your data, collaborate with people, communicate. So it's one place to store your data and then do a bunch of things. But with LLMs, it's about automation. For example, in recruiting, people don't want a place where you can see all the candidates and then manage the candidates and workflow. People want like a co-pilot, which actually talks to the candidates and schedules interviews, So the whole, and then that's being applied to every SaaS tool out there, which means it's a $1 trillion market or even more. So while I do believe there's a bubble in the number of startups which are being funded, but at the same time the market is also huge. So there are going to be a lot of winners. But obviously there's some. So but the winners are going to be coming back to fundamentals of a startup. It's like, are you going after a specific customer problem you're solving, and are you the best at solving that problem? And how are you different from what tools they're already using? And then why is it better, and how do you automate more? It comes down to the fundamentals at the end of the day. But but the market is huge. So I think there are going to be a lot of winners as well.
Yeah, true. At the end of the day, those fundamentals counts, right? Typically, technology is mostly not a differentiator. Differentiator is how you leverage the technology to solve a problem, your business model around it.
Exactly.
And I think that I also believe that those things becomes very important. Those foundations of the business, user centricity, how deeply you are going with your customers, solving their problem. What is the moat you are creating, and that moat in most of the cases would not be technology because everyone has that, but it is the model you build around that technology. So it would be a interesting next 2 years to see that it's a fast-paced environment. As you rightly said, that every another month there is a new model coming which is solving problem in a little bit different way. For example, we started using early days of GPT in our recruitment process. And on your point, SaaS didn't have enough intelligence, right? It was all about data and workflow. And now AI is adding that intelligence to that. Exactly. And I think that is making all the difference. So I think we started with early days of GPT, tried Llama, tried Anthropic. Currently, we are kind of stabilized on Gemini and OpenAI 4.0 right now. But these are expensive, right? I'm sure that for our use case, because we have millions of talent on one side, and a lot of transactions happen. And gradually, we see that we need to optimize it further. In initial, which part of product management you use AI extensively? Which models you use?
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great question. So before I answer that question, again, I think the other thing I wanted to mention is like it's also not just the pace at which the models are getting better, it's also the pace at which it's becoming accessible and affordable. So we talked about Gemini 1.5 Pro from Google, and just yesterday or day before they announced they have dropped the cost by 50%. So it's also the prices. It's like the models are becoming more intelligent and the prices are also coming down. So in the next 6 months, I think intelligence is going to be free. So that opens up the whole world for so many great ideas and disruption. So it's I think the first time where it's very hard to predict where the world is going to be in a couple of years because the pace at which the innovation is happening. So yeah, it's pretty exciting space to be in. So coming to the next question. So to it's basically like pretty much every workflow right now is somehow has an AI part to it or a LLM a workflow to it, right? So if we talked about customers a lot. Excuse me. So the first thing you want to do is like talk to customers, right? You get all the customer data, with the customer support tickets, your sales conversations, your reviews. So before you would aggregate all of that, and some product ops or PM would go through all of that and try to categorize, and then try to bubble up the top insights, and then see if you can build it into roadmap. Right now with LLMs, you don't need to do that. So Ignition, for example, we have AI agents which will go scrape all the reviews, go connect your Gong or say Salesforce or wherever you have your customer feedback or conversations to get the data. Go to Intercom or Zendesk, download all the customer support tickets, aggregate everything, and then bubble up a nice report for you as to like what people are asking for or what people are concerned about, and stop strengths and weakness and so on, right? So that's an example of how AI is automating what would have been a very manual process, before. And then when you come to like, the next step, once you do the customer research, is like, road mapping. How do you prioritize? Same thing, and before a PM would like go through the roadmap, and he or she would then talk to salespeople, talk to execs, talk to everybody, and figure out what are the priorities, and then see like how these features should be ranked. But now you can give access to LLMs, which can access to Salesforce and see like, oh, these deals are very high value deals. So all the feature requests from them should be prioritized on top. So they can act as a co-pilot. Not necessarily a replacement, but more of a co-pilot to help with prioritization. And then when you come to launch, when you want to launch a product, you need to talk about it. Like, how do I message it? How do I talk about it in a way which our end user or persona actually understands the value prop? How do I position it with respect to competitors? So do all the competitive research. Again, before people used to manually go to the competitor website, their blogs, their Twitter feed, and see, and also their reviews and see what people are talking about. AI agents can automate all of that and then help how we should position our product such that the people differentiate this. In their mind, they can differentiate your product versus competitors. And then finally use all this language in the blogs and tweets and email campaigns and everything they put out, which again was previously written by copywriters, and now they're AI agents which produce this marketing collateral, right? So it's an end-to-end from customer research, road mapping to launch planning and the final launch. The whole thing, there is AI agents who are basically like automating each of those workflows and making it super easy for product and marketing teams to then work together to launch the product and then work on it from end to end.
So it is more like, co-pilot, right? When you say AI agent, it is supporting team to do things faster, better, more accurate.
Yeah.
That's what you call AI agent, right? Because
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Right? People are calling it AI agent, AI co-pilot, and there are a lot of kind of terminologies going in the market.
That's a really good question. So I want to explain my perspective on that. So I think for me, AI agent is an LLM which can take action. So what I mean by AI agent is like I think like LLM is a brain, and then you give it hands and legs to take actions, and then give it memory, that becomes an agent. So before, yes, and then coming back to AI Copilot is something which assists you in doing your job. And it's basically more like AI in the loop, where AI in the loop is basically human is doing the main task and AI is helping the human do the task. And then in the AI agent more, it's like human in the loop. The AI agent itself is doing the work, and it from time to time it checks with the human to make sure it's doing the work right. So it's more automation, but more importantly, the AI agent term, I use it specifically if the LLM is equipped with tools to actually take actions, like updating a document, writing and actually writing a blog, not just producing a blog, but actually publishing it or sending an email. So that's when you go into agentic space.
True, interesting. What it needs is data, context, access of multiple things, and instructions, right? What to do. Especially in product management, do you see that AI has reached up to that level? We had a big debate just today morning in our office, and I think we use the term whether AI is a pilot or a co-pilot, right? Especially when it comes to recruitment.
Yeah.
AI reach up to that level that hey, we can let it gear the ship and we sit on the side, or it is still at a supporting agent, right?
Yeah.
Where it can support our audience, whether it is talents or recruiter to do their job more efficiently.
Yeah.
The way I see recruitment, I still see the role of AI as a co-pilot because there are a lot of decisions, right? And many of the decisions are linked with career of people. So that's where whenever we are extensively using AI for kind of matchmaking, it gives the relevancy score of the applicant. It we have built an kind of autonomous tool which call talents and gather the basic information. We are creating kind of a co-pilot for interviewer where with confidence they can ask technical questions because AI is going to interpret answer. They don't need to worry about interpreting the answer which which is giving, right? We have created an AI video interview process where it's a kind of auto interview, a video interview for candidate. But what I am seeing in this process is that especially when it comes to recruitment where humans are involved, and when humans are involved, a lot of bias comes into picture, right? The same talent, if two founders of the same company interview for the same role, both of them would have a different opinion for the same candidate.
Yeah.
But I think what we are seeing, at least in recruitment, after I'm very optimistic about how it is going. Probably it would take a couple of years from here for AI to move from co-pilot to pilot. But today we are seeing that it could be an amazing companion which can improve productivity, help human make better decisions. But in recruitment, still I am not seeing that AI is at that level where we can hand over steering to them. What are your views when it comes to product management? Is it still a good, amazing, smart assistant, or you can rely on AI to even take decisions and move ahead?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm pretty sure everyone is talking about that in their offices today. So my view is like it really depends on use case to use case. So there's no it's very hard to say, oh, AI is going to replace PM or AI is going to replace recruiter. It's never that. It's more about like what are the functions which a PM is doing or what are the functions which a recruiter is doing today. And for each function, whether it can be fully automated or it's a co-pilot or it's more like an assistant, right? So that's where how we think about it, even for PMs. So a lot of the times I mean, that's how I think it also helps with so that humans can stop focusing on all the repetitive, monotonous work, which we can get AI to automate and focus more on the creative work and also on the emotional work or connecting work. So there's lot more. I mean, in the recruiting, there's so much more involved than just whether the job description meets a resume. I'm guessing you have to have chemistry. You need to make sure you can work well with the person. You need to see where work well with the team, and that will never, I think, probably be automated by AI. But then a lot of the work when how do you source these candidates? How do you match it? Like you're just saying, how are you building Copilot for all of that? I think even scheduling the first call, like even calling the candidate, making a phone call, and then scheduling a meeting on the calendar, all of that could be automated. And then spot checking all your technical answers could be done. But finally, hey, whether I want to work with this person on a day-to-day basis, I don't want AI to decide that. I want me to decide that, right? So I think it really depends on the use case and function to function. Same thing in the product management. So a lot of this, for example, we talked about voice of customer, gathering insights. I think that's going to be an agent. You don't need PM to do it manually. Agent can fully automate it. But then there is this whole idea of a vision and what you're actually building the product towards, and there's a judgment. It's not about, so AI will be great at feature factory. AI agents will be a great at feature factory. But if you as a human, you want to have like this vision of where you want to take the company to, and you're going towards that. And that's what PMs can focus on more on the strategy side, and then figuring out like how do we take the product from A to B. So it really depends on the specific use case to use case versus the whole persona per se.
At least across the board, we are saying that AI is taking over a lot of low value work, right? Repetitive work, as you are saying, and it is freeing humans for the more high value strategic work. Interesting. Karthik, when implementing AI in Ignition, in digital product management, what are the biggest challenges you came across and how you solved those?
Yeah, I think there are so many challenges when you talk about AI specifically is one, it's just the expectations. Okay, so let's like talk to a few things. One, a lot of the times people don't trust AI. There's a lot of trust issues, a lot of issues where, oh, is it taking my data? Is it taking my personal information? And also the output, even if it's 99% accurate, sometimes, even if it's 1% wrong, you can't use it because let's say you are using it to email all the candidates. I'm just giving a random example here, and it's your brand which is actually putting that out. And if some of the emails are pretty bad or it's hallucinating, then your brand takes a big hit. So you at the end of you need a human review when it has done 99% of the work, and then you somebody to say, okay, this looks good, and push a button. I mean, we will get there where that's going to be solved, but we're not there yet. So there's trust issues, there's hallucination issues, and then there's this model which keeps getting updated every few months. So when there's a new model, it's not just you can plug and play. It's not like, oh, there's a new Google model now, let's just get rid of OpenAI, put Google. You also need to change the prompts. And then let's say you have like so many different versions of the prompts. So you need to think about what version of the prompt should I use for this use case and what this model. And then you need to have some kind of observability to see like, okay, what kind of outputs are being generated. So evaluation. So how do you evaluate these models and how well they are doing? How do you have a scoring mechanism for each use case to see which model is doing well for each of these use cases? So there is like a whole, I mean, the way I think about it is that there's a traditional tech stack where you had this React front end, Node.js backend, some Postgres or MongoDB database, and there is new AI tech stack, which you have the prompts, the infrastructure layer, the evaluation layer, the visibility layer, the training layer, and then LLM itself. So there's like people have now invested in entirely new tech stack, and I didn't realize that before. Before I was like, hey, yeah, it's so easy. I plug in an OpenAI API, right, and then I just call this API with this prompt. Done. I have an AI, LLM in my product. But as we started building, that was my first impression, like 9 months ago. But when we started building, we just had it, oh my God, to actually make it production ready, we have to build an entirely different tech stack to address all these problems. And so that's the thing which I don't think a lot of people appreciate yet, is how much work is involved. Because when you play with ChatGPT or play with AI, OpenAI, you'll be like, oh, this is so easy. Tomorrow I'll plug in an OpenAI API and my product is AI enabled, right? But that's not true. It takes a lot of work to actually get it from just an MVP phase to the production ready phase where it can scale.
Yeah, very true, very true. I think we are going through the same cycle, right? Making your product AI ready is very easy. But making your product leverage AI to solve a problem with that impact is not that easy, right? Because there are so many nuances comes into picture. There is an intelligence in between. You need to validate that intelligence all the time. And as you rightly said, every model, it means it's a completely new iteration.
Yeah.
All your test cases, use cases need to be reevaluated.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting journey. I think with each and every iteration, it is becoming better.
It's getting better, yeah.
So, and I see that at least in recruitment, if I talk about my context, so it is that trust what you talked about, right? So what I see from our team, I think our expectation from AI is very high. What we are kind of expecting from AI today is that, hey, it should take even better decision than best of the best recruiter. It is not there yet. But we are seeing that it is taking better decision than above average recruiter, right?
Yeah.
So as we said, all those human mistakes are always there when probably we are shipping our email to customer. But possibly our expectations are high. And when the expectations are high, I think that building trust is becoming difficult. But I think we are very clearly seeing that, hey, results are much better than kind of an average skill set human being. But yeah, I think it still need to be evolved to reach up to the expectation we have. Interesting. And you see that how's that adoption in your customer base, especially project management team, right?
Yeah.
Engineers, project manager, marketers. For Ignition, how you are seeing they are embracing AI?
Yeah. I mean,
sorry. Where do they see, which use case they see the most value in?
Yeah. So we have run into exactly all the problems you just described. Like, I think people are still like figuring out how to, like, sometimes they think AI as a magic wand, right? So it's just like it's going to solve all their problems. But there's like a big gap in expectations, and we are like, hey, you need to figure out, like, what the red line is as to like what AI is good at and what AI is not going to solve. Like, anything math or counting, we know LLMs are not good at, right? So if you're asking AI to, like, go through a spreadsheet and then count X number of times of all the people who have done this, a lot of the times, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, like, there's a lot of the things which LLMs are not good at. So it's about figuring out what LLMs are good at and what they are not good at. So in terms of adoption, the other thing is skepticism on the data. The biggest issue we have seen is, like, a lot of the people are like, hey, I don't want my Salesforce data to be fed to your LLM. And we are like, if I don't feed it to LLM, we can't map the Salesforce deals to your product roadmap. And they're like, no, I don't want you to do it. So, but then we're like, okay, then that's the main feature of the product, because they're like, oh, I don't want my OpenAI to steal my client's information, right? There's all these kind of trust issues right now going on. So that's been the biggest bottleneck to adoption in the past. But obviously, it's a new market, right? So as in any new market, your early adopters, people are like, no, feed everything. I don't care. I want to be the fastest in the market. And there are, people who are laggards who are like, I don't, turn off AI. I just want to use it as a project management right now. I don't want any AI. There's some enterprises who use Ignition. They're like, we don't want any AI, because they're still like, I still have to test it. I have to run it through my security team, my IT team, my legal team, and I have to do all this evaluation. It's going to take months. So there's like, we see people in the whole spectrum, and that's what we are seeing. But in terms of the use cases, I think the voice of customer is the most significant use case, because there's a clear value add. It's something which everyone wants to do, but nobody is able to do because of the sheer scale of the customer feedback. And then how do you, and it's a great use case for LLM, because LLMs are really good at taking a lot of unstructured data and then and putting it into a very structured summary or of output format. So I think that's use case we are seeing leaps and bounds in adoption. But all the other use cases, we are like, a lot of skepticism as to, like, whether AI is going to solve it. Can I trust it? Can I give my data access to it? So that's the things which are working on.
Interesting. And are your most of the customers in enterprise bucket, or you also support startup mid-market companies?
It's mostly enterprise. I mean, there's mid-market and enterprise, less startups, because in startups, like you're saying, everyone knows the problem, and there's not much interaction needed between PM and marketing and sales. But obviously, startups still use the VOC piece. But the real problem is when you're scaling your companies, and that's where Ignition is the right product for. So yeah, we mostly mid-market and large enterprises where we see adoption.
Yep. Interesting. Anything you would like to add before we jump to the hiring section of our talk?
Yeah.
Anything on AI, anything on digital product management?
No, I think the last thing I want to add is, like, I know there's a lot of fear in the market about is AI going to replace a lot of workforce? I'm going to lose my job, or what I need to do. And those fears are definitely valid for some roles where it's a lot of manual workflow stuff. But in my opinion, AI is not going to replace a ton of people. It's going to create new jobs. Even right from the time of industrial revolution, a lot of the times people were like, oh, I'm going to lose jobs, but they created more jobs. So I think eventually AI is going to end up creating more jobs, but it's going to replace people who don't know AI. So the best thing you can do to make sure your future is secure and your career is secure is to you understand how to operate these LLMs, how to write prompts, learn prompt engineering, learn these different models. So I would encourage everyone in this podcast to just spend time learning about these LLMs and writing prompts and even building some use cases for your own personal needs. And that's how you secure your career.
True, true, true. I think I heard it at many of the conferences that AI is not your enemy. It is the person who is leveraging AI and you are not, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it would require a good amount of upskilling for everyone, whether it is you, me, or anyone in today's world, because those people who are able to leverage this technology would have a upper edge in terms of moving faster, producing better, producing cheaper.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is we all need to buckle up
Yeah.
to leverage this gap. Interesting. Great. Coming back to your founder's journey,
Yeah.
Karthik, as a founder, starting a company, and whenever I speak with multiple founders, there are typically three broader level kind of challenges with success.
Mhm.
One is your vision or PMF, right? Hey, building a product which market needs. Second is funding, getting acquiring funds so that you can move faster with the competition. And the third is people. There is a hiring the right team, right? Having the right people on your side. Uh, when you started Ignition, when you were building, what was your approach to hiring? What was your approach to find the right people, especially in early days?
Yeah. Hiring is so critical for, for both early stage and late stage companies, but especially for early stage companies, because you can't have redundancy, or you can't afford to have like a person who's not a fit, because that's even going to end up killing the company. So hiring is so critical for early stage companies. And I think COVID changed a lot in terms of how we look at hiring. The startup I did before COVID, we always stressed on in-person teams. We always stressed on hiring. Oh, we are a Silicon Valley company. We only have to hire people from here. And, this whole idea that you start a company in a garage and you work together. And that's how companies are born, right? That's how Google was born or Facebook was born and all that. But that changed with COVID. And people realized that one of the good things which came out of COVID is people realized that you can have completely remote teams succeed and compete in a similar way as in-person teams. So that opened up the whole world for your workforce, which is how we have approached hiring in Ignition. So even for us, every engineer is outside US right now in different countries. Our main teams are, one is in Bangalore in India, and the other is in Poland in Eastern Europe. So we have these two main test centers, but we also have like one person in Philippines and one person in Argentina. So it's a global world, it's a global workforce, which is great for companies and talent, because like now for companies, that means you have a global workforce you can tap into and you're not restricted to your geography. And for talent, they no longer aspire that, if you're an engineer, you have to come to Silicon Valley to work for the best companies. You could like get a job with any of the top startups wherever you are. So that's how we have approached hiring, and that has also significantly changed in a way, because in a way startups can operate, because we can now compete against the really large companies of the world. Just because a company has raised $1 billion and has a 100 people team in the Bay Area doesn't mean a company which has raised $1 million cannot take on like it's the David versus Goliath, because we have this option to recruit from the globe, where the hiring cost might be way different than hiring costs in and the elsewhere in the more expensive regions. So the way coming to your question, the main thing I've approached hiring is not about where they are located or who they are, but I want to find the best person for this job. And obviously the best person for this job who can also work well towards with the team. So those are the two things. And I no longer have to worry about, are they in San Francisco, are they in Bangalore, or they, it doesn't matter anymore. So that's been the biggest advantage.
Interesting. And again, as you said, thanks to COVID, it opened up that horizon for all of us. We even, most of our team is in India. We are also remote, right?
Yeah.
Where we see that we can hire people from anywhere within India, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. People can work from their comfort of their home, and we are able to attract amazing people. Especially for you, when you have your team from India to Europe to Latin America to Philippines, right? quite a diversity.
Yeah.
So, what's your mantra to manage this diverse culture, right? Where you have people coming and there is a big plus to that. They come with a very different perspective. They come with a very different lens and angle. But what is your mantra to create that cohesive team which comes from a very different culture
Yeah.
across the world?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because there's both pros and cons to that. The pros, of course, is they bring in very different perspectives and different cultures, and they feel like truly they are part of a global team and workforce, even if they are even for a startup. The cons are the personalities are very different at the end of the day. Like there's some countries where it's very extroverted, where you can talk a lot about the problems openly, you can raise issues. But in some cultures, they are seen like, oh, they're very introverted, where they don't talk about the problems until you ask them like 100 times about like where you're stuck or something. They try to solve the problem on their own. And then there's some cultures where they're more creative, more left brain, and they're more on the other side where some cultures are more analytical. So I think there's a lot of, I would say cultures, some personalities which are more left brain versus right brain. So that gives that definitely, there's a challenge. So I think it takes a little bit of a longer time to get used to working with a team than you would if you're all from the same geography and same culture. Then you'd probably figure out how to work with the team much more faster. So which means you really need to, as a founder or an exec in a company, you have to make efforts to like bring the team together on different occasions. Also have like non-work meetings, maybe like some monthly hangout or weekly hangouts where you play some games or you talk about the personal life and share personal stories, talk about some fun things they did. So you need to bring them together, and you need to spend a lot more time on building the team in a remote environment, especially with different cultures and personalities, than you would if you're on the same location. So there's some additional investments you would need, and we at Ignition, we try to do that. We also have offsites. We try to get the whole team together once in 3 months or 6 months in India, or once we had a get together, I think in Thailand, where the whole team in different countries came together so that they can still meet in person and get to know each other. So kind of mixing the remote work culture, but also have a week in every 3 or 6 months where the whole team works together in some offsite location. And so these are the ways we have worked to get the team to become like a one cohesive unit, versus feeling like they're all like still part of a different culture or a different company.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I can understand, right? I'm running a remote team in India, and I can imagine that when you have people across the globe, and bringing alignment together. But I'm sure that it also is big plus when there are different perspectives. Karthik, when you're hiring such a diverse team, right? Apart from technical skills, because technical skills are very black and white to gauge, right? There are tools available. If you have been engineer, it is comparatively easy for you to gauge, hey, what level of technical skill this person possesses. The difficult part, which I have seen in hiring, is the softer skills.
Yeah.
And which are more important as a startup, right?
Yeah.
Those collaboration, communication, ownership, proactiveness. What are those key 3 or 4 skills or quality you prioritize, technical aside, which is help you succeed building this global distributed team?
Yeah, that's actually probably one of the most important questions. I think when we talk about recruiting, because to your point, to figure out if a person is talented or not, there's very well-defined processes and interview processes and coding tests and all of that which we follow. But in all the startups I've worked for and even companies, ultimately it never boils down to who's the smartest person in the team or who's the most talented person. It's about, can you work together well as a team? Do you understand the problem well enough? Are you passionate about what the company is doing? And that's the thing which has separated the top performers from the bottom, not somebody who's not doing well. Obviously, like the being good at programming, or if you're hiring for engineer, is table stakes. Like that's like a given. That's why you are at the table. But what then makes you succeed and get promoted and grow in a company is exactly the soft skills. And the soft skills are also very different ways that they got soft skills. There's soft skills about, like mainly like communication skills. Like, for example, when you learn into Blocker, how do you communicate with the team? How do you get that solved? Are you taking ownership of a problem versus waiting for somebody else to solve that problem for you? Are you just saying, oh, this is a back-end bug, I'm a front-end engineer, I don't care? Like that attitude, like how you take ownership. And then also like sharing the knowledge, what you learned with the team, saying, hey, today I came up with this new open source repo, which we can use to solve this problem. And then take a look, this is amazing. So are you sharing the best practices in the company? So those are a lot of those things which cannot be taught, and which cannot be like, some of them cannot be even trained. That's something which you need to like develop as a person. And those are things we look for on the soft skill side. And then there's a passion for the problem you're solving. Like, are you excited about this problem? Like, is this something you want to see in the world exist? Like, that's another thing which cannot be trained. It's something which is innate. And those are the two areas where we look for. One is just passion for the problem. And then how do we judge? It's like, okay, how much research have you done? Right? How much you can tell me on the very first call? Maybe you can tell me something which I can learn about my own space. Like if I'm hiring for Ignition, maybe you can tell me about a PM problem which I never knew existed, or at least never knew was so important. Like that's a passion comes in. And on the communication side, it's just like, the fluidity at which I can communicate, exchange ideas. So instead of pushing back on ideas, can you build on my idea? Can you both work towards like a higher, like a vision and a problem? So when I ask very open-ended questions, so those are the things I look for in when hiring for people. But yeah, it's a tough problem. It's like, there's no magic wand, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think science hasn't reached there yet.
Yeah.
We have tried multiple assessments, probably 8 to 10 different assessments to kind of help our clients gauge this aspect in a better way. Now we have kind of built our own understanding that, hey, we understand what is the culture of the company which is here to hire, and then, based on our experience, our certain kind of, logical workflow we have built, we are able to do a better matchback. But this still remains a subjective challenge to solve. Yeah. Interesting.
And to coming back to connecting this to AI, I think this is one of the problems which will probably be not solved, or the last one to solve by AI, because at the end of the day, the LLMs are a pattern matching. They have a bunch of text that they see the text and match what the next set of text to be. So how do you then involve emotions and chemistry and all of that in your evaluation process? So that's going to be a fascinating problem to solve for you when you build a AI copilot. It's like, how do you, obviously there's if somebody is good at programming, which you can 100% solve, but are they a good communicator? Are they a good team fit? Are they passionate? Like, how do you solve that problem? I would be so excited to work on such a problem. I'm sure you're thinking about it.
Yeah. So when it's very difficult to, because there are humans on the both the side, right? And not necessarily that every company is valuing the similar kind of attributes in a person. So there is no one formula fits to all. I think, one intelligence we have started building in our platform is kind of gauging culture of different companies, and we are kind of collating that data.
Nice.
So I think once we know that, hey, Karthik has come, Ignition has come, we understand that, hey, this is the culture which Karthik follows.
Yeah.
Then I think that intel within our database, which is built based on our algorithm, and for us to understand, hey, these are the startup where we have some information about the similar culture. And if we pick people from those startups who have spent 2 years there, higher chances that that person would succeed in Ignition's environment. Right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are trying to figure out solutions in one way or another, but these are complex problems to solve, right? For sure.
That's great.
Would love to touch base on, Karthik, when you have hired people from, I heard at least 4 different countries, and very different, right? Latin America, Eastern Europe, India, and Philippines. These are very different cultures, right? Culture is never right or wrong. It is just different, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, help us understand, because I think we rarely get a guest who has exposure to four different countries and people within their team. Share what are the kind of pluses and minuses. It's like strengths and weaknesses. Let's put it in a better word. You have seen in people in all these different countries.
Yeah, no, yeah, I again, this is all my own personal bias, so I wouldn't use this to generalize, and I definitely want to just add a big caveat that I don't mean to like do that. So it's just my purely personal opinion, but I think like people in different parts of the world have their own different strengths and weaknesses based on the cultures they are brought up with. So I grew up in India, and I feel like I am more right-brained and more analytical, and I am not as much creative as some of the people in Eastern Europe, where I feel like our designers and front-end engineers in Eastern Europe are really good on the creative side, and our engineers, back-end engineers in India are really good on like the AI, ML, and APIs and back-end development side. So for me, the best of the both world would be like have front-end engineers from Eastern Europe and back-end engineers from Bangalore. But obviously, that doesn't mean they're not amazing front-end engineers in India or back-end engineers in Eastern Europe. It only means that it's just a probability that the probability that if I hire it's just a sample set. It's just how many people are there. It's a probability that if I hire an engineer, front-end engineer from Eastern Europe, or a designer from Eastern Europe, they might be better than a designer versus a back-end engineer in India. They might be better in more right brain analytic skills. I think that comes down to our education system, the way we are taught in schools, and how we are very academic and we're very focused. And we have IITs, which is a very very competitive exam, and a lot of the people I'm specifically talking about engineer recruiting, by the way. How we like compete and like study for the IIT JEE and then get through. So it's a very academic and that kind of a culture. So you get those kind of people. They're the best people from India. And then if you want very creative, like designers and like, more about like graphic designers and like people who make really good videos, I feel like there's different parts in Europe who are really good at that because their culture, they grew up in that culture. That's how they're educated. And they didn't grow up like solving a lot of academically oriented programs, but more about creative programs. So I think it comes down, and that's cultural, in my opinion. So that's what I've seen. And I feel people in Latin America, they are very friendly and they are very extroverted. So you don't have a lot of communication problem there because they tend to talk a lot more. They tend to share a lot more. They try to engage the team more. They are like they're always the people in the team who are the highest energy. So they come with that to the team. So so you have all this mix of people who are there's nothing to do with talent. Everyone is equally talented. It's more like I am the person who brings energy to the team. I'm the person who brings more analytics and right brain skills to the team. I'm the person who brings more creativity and design to the team. So, and that is focused on different cultures as well, in my opinion. So that's kind of how I've seen. This is my own opinion. This is my own personal bias. My sample set is very low with the engineers, but that could be completely different. Obviously, India has 1 billion people, so I wouldn't generalize anything. But that's what I've seen in my own personal experience.
Interesting. And some light on way of working, right? Because that's what matters the most when everyone is working as a team. What are your observation in kind of differences in way of working in all these different cultures? When you picked up, Latin America, it's more about extrovert energy. But for other geos which you have observed, what differences you have seen in way of working?
Yeah, so I think like in Eastern Europe specifically, so yeah, definitely Latin America and that part of the world is a lot of energy and a lot of collaboration, a lot of talking and a lot of brainstorming. On Eastern Europe, it's more very introverted culture. I think it's like more like independent work. So like you give me a problem, I'll go away, I'll solve it for you, and then I'll come back to you. And that's how I like to operate. And then, and also more opinionated, I would say, more strong opinions on like this. I think this is how it has to be done. It's not in a wrong way. It's just that's the thing which it was my challenge because I couldn't understand whether this person was opinionated or is this cultural. So it just turned out this person was not opinionated at all. This person, engineer, was completely open to other opinions and taking it. But the way he presented it, it felt to everybody, it's like, oh, this person is just trying to push his stuff on everybody in the team, right? But once we recognized it's a cultural thing and not a personality thing, everyone understood how to work with that person. So that's why it matters when you build a global team. You need to understand the nuances of working with people from different regions, right? So yeah, and then the people working with India, I think obviously like it's more easy for me being an Indian myself, right? So it's so easy for me to connect because like I grew up in that culture and I know exactly the mindset, and I know it's a very analytical mindset, and you approach everything with a more of a backed by data, like let's like think about it, and the way you approach problems is different. But people from some other region might find it difficult to work with people. So but once you know the nuances, then you can solve it, right? So I think that's an advice for all the founders hiring global teams is like, you shouldn't judge a person based on their personality. You need to understand their culture first and see how they were being brought up. And then you apply that mask then you take away the mask. Then you understand, I know this person doesn't mean bad things or very opinionated stuff. It's just the way they operate, they work. And then once you realize that, then that's how you get all the people to then work together as a team.
Interesting. And that understanding culture is important, right? As you rightly said, once both the parties, right? The person you are hiring and the hiring manager who is working, I think both need to go a little extra mile to understand that culture. And once kind of that is embraced, understood, I think the work environment becomes very different.
Very different.
We have created 2 courses, right? Because we kind of deploy a lot of Indian talent in global teams. So we have created a 4-hour course for talents who are joining global companies, and a 30-minute course for the hiring manager who is hiring a person from India for the first time.
Yeah.
And that course has been created by a behavioral consultant in US who have spent good amount of time in India and US.
Oh, that's great.
I think we see a lot of difference once people go through that, right? But as you rightly said, it's about uncovering those nuances, and once you understand, then it's a very different world altogether.
Yeah. So actually, that reminds me. There's one thing which I want to call out specifically on the Indian side of hiring and working with candidates, because we have I think most of our engineers, a lot of the engineers are in India, in Bangalore. So that's so true, because one of the things I didn't understand before is like at least when the market is hot, is like when you make an offer to a candidate, you almost assume that the candidate is going to take the offer and going to join. But I've seen so many cases where just a week before, either the current employer will match it or they'll get a better offer and they won't join anymore. And they won't even communicate with you that they're doing this until the day they have to join. So these are the issues which I didn't know about. So then I had to plan for it ahead of time. So in fact, there was this person who was like a IIT JEE rank 10 or something, who went to IIT Kanpur. So very, very accomplished. And then, had the best talent, and we were so excited. And on the day he was supposed to join, he's like, sorry, I'm not joining because I got a better offer. So there's a lot of that, I think, which I would say people have to be very, very aware of, both on the hiring front and on the candidate front. That on the candidate front, if you're doing this because you are selfish and you got 20% more, but you're ruining the Indian workforce name for the global teams. Because I am fine, I'm an Indian, I understand this culture, so I'm fine with it. But if somebody else who is my peer, they are like, for example, my co-founder, he's like, what is this happening? So it's just like, okay, this is pretty bad, right? So I feel like there is, where I was going with this is like the training you're creating, the awareness you're creating. I think that's one of the most important things you can do to invest in the recruitment sector, to build awareness around practices like this. So both on the employer side and on the candidate side, we can build more ethical way of approaching the job offer. So it's not like you're buying a car, it's more like you're making a career decision which affects your life and the company's life. So how can you be more ethical towards approaching this? So yeah, that's a pretty important topic. And I wonder, like, what have you seen and from your side?
No, it's a challenge in the market. I'm not sure. Have you observed it anywhere else in the world, in Eastern Europe, Latin America, or this is your very special experience with India? So you see it elsewhere, or it is,
I think this mostly it's a human thing. It's a global thing. We do see it everywhere, but it's just how rampant it is. That's it.
No, and aware about it. This is a considerable challenge in the market, right? And I think companies like us are trying to find solutions in one way or another. We have built practices because many of the clients who come to us, I think they are not aware that they are going to experience or their processes have to be up to this level to hire from India. So we play that role. I actually went deep into this particular challenge, right, and tried
Yeah.
to understand, hey, why this is happening in India, right? And then I realized that the ecosystem in India need to change for that. What is happening that most of the companies have 90 days notice period for the talent. On the other side, companies who are hiring, they want to hire people in 15 days, 30 days. In US, for example, it's a 2-week notice on either side.
Yeah.
Both are free. In India, when people leave, companies are keeping 90 days notice, and when they want to hire immediate joiner.
Yeah.
So what is happening that for talent, those who are today working in a company, nobody is looking at their CV because they have 90 days to serve there. So what is happening that, for that guy, he knows that, I'll get better offer when I reach near to 15 to 30 days of joining period. He typically doesn't have a choice to pick the first offer, accept it, resign, and then reach up to those 15, 30 days of acceptable notice period when he'll start getting better offers. So I think this is the core challenge I felt within or realized within the industry. There are solutions to that, right? Or at least there are ways to reduce it.
Yeah.
As you said, it is a universal challenge, but I think there are ways to reduce it. Few ways are very obvious, where you look for people who are in 15, 30 days notice period, but then it is not going to solve the challenge at the core.
Yeah.
One way to solve it is everyone, employer and employees, both need to understand that, hey, we need to equalize this kind of demand and supply, or how much we want them to serve as a notice period versus what we are looking into market. I think that equation is somewhere disturbed, but a complex problem to solve.
Yeah.
We found few ways to reduce it, and that's how we are helping most of our clients to mitigate. But yeah, as you rightly said, it's pain. On the other side, if when I look at, because we are a platform for us, client and talent both are our customers, right? So when I speak with them and try to understand that same, I'm speaking with a lot of IITians, and when they are holding multiple offers, I try to understand why, and not all. In few cases, they have this kind of reasons, right? That they don't have a choice. They won't get the dream job with 90 days notice, so they have to take some risk. But few practices would definitely help, and that we always encourage people. We publish that it's inform that company as soon as possible if you are not joining. Don't wait till last day. The
Exactly.
first part
This is some of the communication. It's just that's it, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that this person didn't join the company, because like obviously like I'm happy, but it's the only concern is like, if wish you had communicated to me a little bit advanced, right? So I'm very happy for you. Congratulations, good luck. You got a better offer. Obviously I'm happy, but I'm also glad that you didn't join our company. But I didn't know about it, so I lost a bunch of time and money. So I think it's just plugging the gap of communication. I think will solve half the problem. Yeah.
I think we are working on it. There are a couple of startups who are built only to solve this problem. It's not a simple problem. It will take some time, but great minds, those startups are working towards solving it. So I'm sure there would be a solution to that.
That's amazing.
Great. All right. Last question on hiring from my side. Especially what I have seen, Karthik, that for startups, because those are startups, they still don't have that employer branding in the market. Attracting talent is a big challenge, which I have noticed, right? And especially when you want to attract good talent. But what has been your mantra to attract great talent, especially when your name is not out there?
Yeah, so that's where it comes down to founders. So I always joke that when you have a early stage company, you don't have a company. There is no company. There's no brand. It's you who are the brand. As a founder, the founding team and the founding engineers, the first 5 people, they are the brand. So the advice is like, leverage your brand, your network, your schools. That's how you kind of do it. Like, for example, if our first engineer in Bangalore, so he was very passionate about it, and he went to IIT Kharagpur, and then he pulled in a bunch of people from his batch, and then he brought his IIT brand name to Ignition, and then say, okay, like let me hire more people. And we obviously found a lot of good people, non-IIT and across the world in different cultures. But the example here is like Ignition. Nobody knows Ignition. Nobody cares about Ignition, at least in the early days, like when we just started, right? But we didn't talk about Ignition. We like, hey, I'm Karthik. I'm ex Facebook. I'm leveraging my Facebook brand. My co-founder is leveraging his company's brand. My engineer is leveraging the IIT brand. So we use the brands we're associated with before to then pull in talent to our company. We never talk about the company. We only talk about but we talk about the company problem because we want the candidate to be passionate about the problem we are solving. But from brand perspective, we leverage our past brands, the team's brands.
Interesting. It's all about convincing, right? In founder's life, selling is everywhere, whether you are selling your product to customer or hiring.
Yeah.
Right? No, yeah, great. Let's try to create a recap, right? So Karthik, you have built, a globally distributed team. What are your top 3 tips to those founders who are hiring today, possibly from India, from across the globe, remote distributed team? But what are your top 3 tips for them?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So I'm just going to focus mainly on hiring as the top 3 things. The first thing is like, when you hire the first set of people, they're almost like your co-founders. So make sure you hire the first set of engineers or just in other team members, whoever you're hiring. Like you look for them as if they are your co-founders. So have a pilot period, work with them for a few weeks on one project, see you gel with them, and then make sure you're investing a lot of time in the recruiting process to get the first set of people. And so that's tip 1. Tip 2 is once you have a core set of people, leverage their networks, leverage their referrals, and then leverage all their brands to then go hire the next set of people. And then when you hire the next set of people, that's when the culture starts forming. Right. So then you actually, there's a company. So the other thing is like the company culture is never what founder says, this is a culture. It's not that. It's the culture which organically emerges because of all the first 10 people you hire. Literally the first 10 people set the culture for the company for the next 5 years. And then the next 100 and next 1,000 and so on. So it's really important that you start thinking about the culture in step 2. And then step 3, I would say the tip 3 is like, don't over-optimize for geography. Don't over-optimize for your own personal biases. Just because you're in San Francisco doesn't mean you have to look for all engineers in San Francisco. So make sure that you have a very open mind about hiring the right person anywhere in the world to make sure that they're the right fit for the problem you're trying to hire for or the job you're trying to hire for. So yeah.
Very precise and very thoughtful. Great. Now, this was for all those startup founders who are our listeners, and we have a lot of tenants who are also listening to our podcast, right? At Ignition, you are hiring, right? You have been constantly hiring. The same way, what are those top 3 things you would like to advise to talents who want to join Ignition or a global startup like yours?
So the first thing is like put yourself out there. Meaning like go contribute to open source projects if you're an engineer, go start posting on LinkedIn and Twitter, go start interacting with other people. Don't just be stuck to your own job. Even if you're not looking for a job, make sure you're also like building your personal brand, basically making sure that you're contributing to open source, attending conferences, attending events, building a network outside your work. And that's how you reach companies like Ignition eventually. And also people, it's so easy for us to spot you from here. Then the second thing is make sure, again, like we talked about it before, is like make sure you follow practices where, when you're taking up a job offer or you're talking to a founder, that you're really serious and you actually want that, and you're not necessarily like trying to shop for a better job. You have a really long career. Your 10% hike is not going to go, or 20% hike more is not going to go a long time. It's the relationships you build with people. For me, the relationships have been everything. I never got a job or a funding through application on website. Generally, it's through relationships. And then eventually, like my first check in my startup my job referral at Facebook were all from the network I built. So make sure you build relationships, and it's not just about a number. And then so those are the two really important tips. The third thing I would say is like it comes down to like how do you offer help. Even if there is no job, you should be able to offer like, hey, can I help you in this way? Can I help you with this project? I see that you're working on this AI. I built this open source RAG agent. Do you want to use it? Be able to offer. It's all about services. It's also about being able to offer first before asking. And once people know that you're that, then it's so easy to get jobs. Like a lot of the people we even hired were like at some point have worked for some project or interacted in a different non-professional way. And then when you look for a job, like, yeah, I know that person. So those are 3 tips I would say.
Super. Very interesting. It is all about going out, following right practices, building network, and giving, right?
Yeah.
Super. Great. Amazing conversation, Karthik. I thoroughly enjoyed. I think it has been a very casual conversation. We talked about a lot of areas, right? Starting from you starting the Ignition, digital product management, AI, hiring, different cultures. It was a power-packed conversation. Thanks a ton for that.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show. Yeah, same here. I absolutely loved our conversation. Seems like we covered a broad range of topics. So hope the audience also loves it. And yeah, please, visit Ignition on haveignition.com. We're also building the AI agents platform, which is doublo.ai. And please let me know with any feedback, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter or email me. So I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a ton, Karthik.
It's so nice speaking with you today. Thanks a lot, Jamin, once again. But I really hope to looking forward to meeting you in person when you're here in Bay Area next.
Oh, for sure. Right?
Thank you.
Bye.